We're going to begin with the obvious question of what is intercultural competence and do a bit of close reading here and really unpack each of these terms. So let's get started. The prefix inter means between or among. For example, interstellar means among the stars. International means between nations. So intercultural then can be taken to mean between or among cultures. And what is culture exactly? One way of describing culture that I think is helpful is to think of it as a collection of beliefs and practices that tie a particular community together by things like shared language, common customs around food, clothing. These are the kinds of things that tie together an ethnic culture oftentimes. But also sports teams and workplaces could be said to have a culture. Oftentimes they share a common mission and methods of conducting their work. And within all of these examples also exist subcultures that really highlight the variations on the overall overarching culture of a given community. So a team might have a shared mission, but each person on that team is going to bring different insights, different skills, different experiences for doing that work. Again, the word intercultural refers to the interaction between or among these different cultural dynamics. Moving on, we can think of competence as having sufficient knowledge, judgment, skill, or strength. And there's internal aspects of competence and external. That's why I like this image here of a human head and these objects surrounding it, because there's the internal aspects of competence that include things like understanding, empathy, analysis, right? But then there's also the outward aspects of competence that include perhaps more hard skills like communication and relationship building, networking. So in order to be competent with anything, you have to have both of these. You have to have the knowledge, you have to know stuff about that subject, but you also have to have that active sense of what do you do with that knowledge, and are you also skilled at that? If we bring these terms back together, we can see that intercultural competence is the quality of having knowledge and skill to communicate effectively across a diversity of cultures. And the world is becoming more interconnected all the time, and the country of the United States is becoming more diverse in terms of its demographics all the time. And so intercultural competence is an essential competence to have across virtually every sector. Just as a couple of examples, within higher education, so at universities and colleges, teachers are constantly having to adapt their teaching styles and what they're teaching and how they're teaching to suit different student needs because traditionally aged students who are perhaps recently out of high school and they're living on the campus of their college or university, those students are going to have very different needs from returning adult learners who might be much older. They might have families and full-time jobs, and they might be living off campus. They might be only taking night classes or only taking online classes. So the needs between different students is always in flux, and teachers are always having to enact their intercultural competence to respond to those needs. To give another example, in healthcare, workers are providing care to people of different religions and cultures, and there's a great need of continued intercultural competence training among healthcare workers to be able to deliver care effectively to people from different backgrounds. And the Institute of Medicine has found that a lack of intercultural competence has led to an increase in the inaccurate diagnosis and treatment, and therefore exacerbated illness of many patients, especially those who come from marginalized communities, communities of color, people whose first language perhaps isn't English. So there's a great need for being interculturally competent, and it looks a little bit different in every context depending on what aspect of society, what sector you're working within. A couple of related terms that I think it's worthwhile to talk about here: intercultural sensitivity and intercultural tolerance. Sometimes these are terms that get used interchangeably and can just replace intercultural competence. I distinguish between them, as do some others, and so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that here. Intercultural sensitivity, to me, is a useful term in some contexts because it refers to that first aspect of competence where you have that sensitivity, you have an awareness or understanding of different cultural dynamics and how they change across context, across time, across geography. But it doesn't necessarily refer to that second aspect of, am I able to put that into practice? So I would distinguish between the terms in that sense. And then intercultural tolerance also gets used sometimes, but this isn't a term that I tend to use much at all because, to me, being tolerant, that's almost like you're not fully accepting other cultures. You're just kind of putting up with them for the time being because you have to. So to me, that it indicates a deeper kind of problem. So that's why we're framing things around intercultural competence, because it's coming from a place of understanding and empathy and acceptance, and also doing both aspects of both understanding and analyzing as well as putting those skills into practice.